Welcome to Fairy Tale Access, where the head fairy's quest is to prove that fairy tales do exist in actual time rather than once upon a time. Together, we will unravel the heroes, young and old, who turn dreams into reality. These are the people who still believe in happily ever after. The discoveries will bend even our most cynical non-believers into believing in fairy tales. Hi, welcome to Fairy Tale Access. Today we have Rebecca Laffar Smith calling in by Skype from Perth, Australia. And if you love The Sixth Sense or Ghost Whisperer, you're really going to enjoy Spirit Talker. Thank you for joining us. How are you?
Thank you. I'm really good.
And so tell us your experience maybe, or why you chose to have this as a young woman who speaks to ghosts, like a coming of age story too.
A lot of it is based on lived experience. It's the kind of book that I needed to have read when I was the age of my protagonist. But of course, that book didn't exist. But when I was that age, I was going through some mental health challenges. I actually have bipolar, and it was breaking out at the time, but no one knew that. They had no idea what was going on with me, just that I was unstable and having issues, and I was having hallucinations. And I've been able to see things all my life, so I kind of understood that the ghost world exists. I've got a family that has spiritual beliefs. But there was this kind of line between what is part of that spiritual belief and what is part of the going crazy from having a mental illness, the hallucination versus the spirit world, if you will. And I thought eventually I need to tell that story so that the teens that are going through these sorts of challenges today can feel like they have someone who's experienced it before, or can feel that kind of bond and recognition.
So there really aren't spirit talkers?
There are. I think there are.
Okay.
I know a few people who believe in spirit mediums and definitely connect with spirit, and it's something I feel like I've been able to do all of my life. So it's one of those taboo topics. Some people believe, some people don't, but we'll let it land where it lies. And I'd rather choose to believe that we have that ability to connect than think we live in such a detached world that we can't connect with the people we've lost.
It was so scary in parts, though, for her.
Yes, definitely. And I think a lot of the time people don't realize that death in any sort of sense can be such a traumatic thing that the echoes of it ripple through time. And people who can see spirit don't always get the pretty warm fuzzies, angel wings and halos aspect of it. Sometimes there is the gruesome spirits who are clinging because they've gone through trauma, and you get to see that. It is quite traumatic.
Yeah, there was that one sleepover that really changed things for her again, because she had just lost her mother, and they moved to a new city, and then this sleepover and talk and just trying to bring justice for some of these people that she met along the way.
Yes, Thea was one of those, I think, a transformative moment for her, because for so long she'd spent in this new town just keeping her ability under wraps, just trying to coast through and be normal. But then Thea's story really got to her, and she couldn't keep the barrier up between what was going on for her hearing Thea's story and trying to hide that from the friends that she was having this slumber party with.
Yeah, I almost thought it would work out because they were telling ghost stories anyway. Not so much.
Yeah. It's an interesting one, because it's actually that story. It's not word for word what happened in my real life, but there was a time when I was camping out the back with my cousins, and we were telling ghost stories. But I live on what used to be Byford's public swimming pool.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point in time, a little boy must have died there, because I was experiencing a psychic moment at that point during our slumber party, and it freaked my cousins out, and they've never camped in my backyard since.
Great. Nothing like scaring people. But it was that whole unexpected experience, and it really flowed well. It was so fluid, like a painting. What's your background? Is this your first book, your 35th book?
My 17th book.
17th?
It's my third YA.
Wow. How long have you been writing?
I've been writing all my life. So I've got, like, my earliest poem was when I was 6 years old, and I was internationally published poet at 12. And then I went into freelance writing. So I did a lot of copywriting, nonfiction writing, white papers, and all that kind of does your head in. But I've only been writing fiction since 2012.
And you've written 17 books since 2012?
Yes. Some of those are children's picture books, so they're a lot shorter. They're faster to write. And I've collaborated with illustrators who've done the artwork for those, so they're quicker to produce.
Wow. So what was it like writing? So if you've lived some of the experiences that have gone on in the book, what was it like to write the book? Did it help put closure on the past? Or
this
did
was
it
actually a book that I started. I started trying to write this story in 2013, and every time I tried to write it, I was trying to make it something that it couldn't be. Like, I originally envisioned it as kind of like Ghost Whisperer, where it was episodic, and I'd be releasing a series of books, and each of them would deal with her confronting a ghost situation and handling their problem and helping them move on. But none of that kind of gelled, and for years and years I tried to tell the story until I got to a point where I was okay enough in my life to say that I'm happy with where I am. I'm happy with who I've become. I'm happy to accept and be open about my gifts or my disabilities. And it was only when I could accept that and step into this space where I'm sharing me rather than this ghost girl story that it became what it is, which I think was a journey that it needed to really go on. And I'm so proud of what came out of that. But the telling of it then became stepping back into the memories. So at any point that you cried in the story, I was probably bawling my eyes out as I was writing it. And the little joy moments and the uplifts, and like Grayson is one of those people who just touch your heart the whole way through. And those moments meant a lot to me because I was able to connect with experiences that I've had, even moments where she's doing figure skating or skating at the roller skating rink.
Mm-hmm.
That's my childhood. I did that. And so it was great to be able to step into those memories and really just write onto the page sort of the way it happened in the real world, even though it was these characters doing that rather than me.
No, that was really well laid out. Brought back a lot of memories. But you also tackled suicide.
Mm-hmm.
So was there something that happened during your life that drew you in to reveal how you did such a good job of revealing how it would hurt everybody around them without, being like the commercials? You weren't blunt about it. You just wove it in so that, I was in tears.
That's like, as an author, I love that it connected with you. That side of it, because of my bipolar, I experienced both the highs of mania and the lows of depression. So I've been to that knife line where I've almost taken my own life. And it's only now that I've come out of that dark space that I can see the impact that it has and the way it would have affected my family. I've also lost my brother to terminal illness, so I know what it is to grieve someone like that, especially, don't know how much I want to reveal of who deals with that, but the whole losing a brother is such a heart-wrenching thing that you really do struggle to understand your place in the world and how you can go on after them. So I thought it was a good way to kind of show that depth without it being directly impacting on Sarah, who is our main character. Because if your main character is the one in the throes of that darkness, they're too in it to really be able to express the joy that comes from surviving, from living.
You know, you handle death in several different ways throughout the book. You know, the experience of loss, suicide, the murders. So it was really intriguing to read. Couldn't put it down. And what other books do you write? Are they in these kind of categories for your series?
All of my YA books have some degree of neurodivergence in them, so mental illness or mental health aspects. Or, for example, with City of Light, one of the main characters has a terminal illness, so she's combating her physical body not being able to withstand what she needs to deal with. Like, she's supposed to save the world, but her body is betraying her. So all of the stories have that kind of through line where we're dealing with disability and mental illness. But there's always from a point of view of like the wonder. Like, I've always been very passionate about exploring our possibility and our potential as people. And I believe every person has the ability to live into their best selves. And I want my characters to do that as well. So all of my stories deal in people facing these challenges, but then living into their best potential.
Yeah. And also just looking at your therapist a little more. A lot more. So how did that...
It's okay to hate him.
Yeah, but some of them you really have to hate. Jeez. That was kind of like...
Well, that therapist is an amalgamation of several that I've had to deal with over my years. I won't tell you how many.
I know.
There are some really great people in the mental health industry that do brilliant work, but then there are also people who have a very closed mind, and they've been trained to see the psyche and the way the brain works in one specific way. And so they're not open to the alternatives and the options that might be going on for people.
You think? Yeah. I don't know. Sometimes I just think that whole group might have more problems than the people they're trying to help.
A lot of the times that is true. But then if you imagine, I know, especially for nursing and doctors, the stress that they go through in their professional lives, that has to bombard them to some point, and they're always going to struggle. And if you can think about what it must be to sit in your office listening to the terrible stories people are sharing that are putting them into these depressive cycles or these mental health challenges, you've got to take that on board as a therapist. So sure, they're bound to have their own issues as well, just because they're shouldering the weight of everyone else's.
Exactly. And I like how people could see ghosts at different times and how she could relay that information. That was a little bit like the ghost whisper, but there were a lot of really scary moments, like Sixth Sense, where you're like, I can't leave her alone. I have to read another chapter.
Yeah.
Poor Sarah.
The thing I found is that the more stressed she got, the more out of control she was feeling, the more she was bombarded by those sorts of imagery. So it was a good way to maintain that tension through the story, just to show that when you lose control of your emotional self, you lose the ability to control what you're being bombarded by in your environment as well.
That's true. She finally did find a way to make it work with her life where she didn't freak out the people around her, kind of, towards the end. But it was a really nice spin. It was so well woven. It was really well done. It was imaginative, but realistic. So you could picture these things happening. And then all of the, little stories that happened along the way inside of it, some of them were truly heartbreaking. And you did bring me to tears several times.
Oh, I don't want to say I'm glad, but I'm glad.
That's nice.
I'm doing my job if you're connecting with it in that way. And I love that readers can take that experience and really live it rather than just be detached from it.
Oh, definitely. So what's life like in Perth, Australia?
At the moment, it's been a bit crazy. We're still dealing with COVID things and whole border closures, and WA is very isolated generally. And at the moment, it's even more isolated than ever because our borders are hard closed against the rest of the country and internationally. Our weather's been insane. It's supposed to be winter, and yet today we had pouring rain and thunderstorms. And last week we had 40-degree days. So 40 degrees is like 104 Fahrenheit. So it's super hot and yet pouring rain the next day. It's crazy.
Wow. And then you have all those bugs and animals to deal with. Everything's trying to kill you in Australia.
It's such a misleading thing to think that though, because yes, we have such deadly creatures, but I live in a city and it's the same kind of urban environment that you get all over the world. I don't walk out my actually, well, sometimes I can walk down the street and see kangaroos, but most of the time you don't get a lot of the actual wildlife going on because we we live in a cultured society.
So you really do see kangaroos once in a while?
Yes, so I live right on the outskirts of the metropolitan area, so it's semi-rural. And yeah, we do have kangaroos that will occasionally be along the farming areas near our highway.
Oh, well, that would be wow. But what about those spiders and those spider web things?
Redbacks are definitely something to watch out for. They can be dangerous, but they're not they're not everywhere. The huntsmans, the big hairy ones that are kind of the size of your fists, those ones are scary to look at, but completely harmless. And those are the ones that we normally get the most of.
Oh, wow. That's it's so different.
It's like I think of America with their tarantulas, and like we don't really get those.
So what other hobbies do you have that help contribute to the way you write, to the way that you get into the young person's mind? Because it's completely young adult, coming of age type of story.
It helps that I've got two teenagers. I've got a 17-year-old and a 21-year-old. So I kind of pick their brains. My 21-year-old is always one of my alpha readers. So she gets to go over everything and make sure that I haven't completely stepped away from today's teens, basing it off of my own teenage years. But I read a lot. YA is my favorite genre to read. So I'm very immersed in that space. And I love TV and movies and all that sort of thing. So I'm very influenced by story. And I teach story. I train other writers with plot storming and helping them develop their mythic structure and develop their stories and their characters. So it's something I've been living for the past 10 odd years.
So what's the main thing that you teach other authors with plot structure? Because that seems to be an area that newer authors sometimes have a problem with or completely diverge from and then come back, and it's almost like you're reading another story sometimes.
I teach a workshop called Plot Storming, where I use examples from Star Wars, from Harry Potter, from Pride and Prejudice to show the mythic structure of the hero's journey in various different genres. So you can see that all story has this underpinning structure that gives it the shape of the arc and the way the characters are going to journey through and transition. And so I teach that primarily along with the character archetypes that go with that.
Excellent. And what other hobbies do you have? Or what's your favorite family activity?
Kids and I play video games together these days. I used to roller skate, obviously, but getting too old for that now. And yeah, mostly it's the video games with the kids. My son loves to do parkour and archery, so I take him to those. I still do a lot of running around, taking kids to everything. Both my children are special needs. My son is diagnosed with autism, and we suspect my daughter is on the spectrum as well. So we have therapies and all those sorts of things to go to. Not a lot of extra time to do anything but read, watch TV, and play video games.
Excellent. So do any of your other books deal with the autism spectrum?
My Shadows of Nar series has a character in there, Casper, who is technically on the spectrum, although he's proving difficult to write because um, he's probably more Asperger's, quite high functioning in many ways, and there isn't very many opportunities to show his getting overwhelmed or having sensory issues and things like that. And it's something I'm having to kind of unravel with him as a character because he doesn't express his autism as effectively as I'd like to see, which is such an awkward thing to say because you don't want to force someone to be autistic, but I want to be able to portray a sense of autism on the page that is a fair representation rather than the often pretty picture people paint of these super high functioning autistics that basically have no challenges. I wanted to be able to show that sometimes you can have a person with autism that can be brilliant in some areas and yet still has these struggles. And so Casper is a lot like my son, where he has these heightened abilities, super confident with computers and technology. And when he's in this virtual reality world, he's brilliant. And then when you take him out of that world, bring him into the real world, have to deal with people, with noisy places and that sort of thing, that's when he can't function the way society would expect him to.
Excellent. I'm sure you'll find your way to it because this book was so good for young people dealing with mental illness, possibly seeing ghosts, but took them on, just an incredible journey. And the underlying theme was, just looking at things and looking at people in a different way. So that you had a better understanding of what was going on around you, the way that your actions influenced other people, and how you projected yourself was really important in this series too.
Mm.
So growing up, what was your favorite book of all time?
I hate the word favorite. It's like choosing children. I suppose I'm going to step away from favorite and go to the books that most influenced me in my teen years, and that was a series called the Ancient Future Trilogy by Tracy Harding. Tracy Harding's another Australian author who is also dyslexic like I am. But what I loved about her series was that she took aspects of truth, of metaphysical belief and spiritual belief, and incorporated into her fiction so that it came across as something anyone reading can just embrace and enjoy. And I loved that she could kind of hide the kernels of reality in something that anyone can say yes to. I wanted to that's what kind of inspired me to write the books I love to write, because I love the idea of reaching through people's closed minds to open doors and open windows. And I think fiction is a great way to do that.
Definitely. You definitely did that. And what's the next series on your list?
I've actually got books 2 and book 3 in the Shadows of Nar series. Casper's the one proving difficult at the moment. And then you can see at the bottom corner over here, my debut, The Flight of Talk, was originally supposed to be the first of a series. And then I kind of got sidetracked on other books and I went into the children's books that I was doing for homeschooling my children. And that series has kind of evolved, and that book's now technically book 5 of a 10-book series. And so once I've got the 2 more sci-fis out to finish the trilogy for the Shadows of Nar, I'll be digging into those 10 books and turning them into proper YA instead of they're kind of a new adult at the moment. They're a little aged up and I want to bring them down a bit.
Wow.
A lot of work ahead.
Yes, a lot of work. How long does it take you to write a book?
Sometimes it can take me a month. Sometimes it can take me several years. Like I said, with Spirit Talker, I technically started in 2013. But what actually came together as the final version was done for NaNoWriMo last year. So 50,000 words in November last year, and then the final 30,000 written from December to January, edits in February and March with beta readers, and then published by October. So
Oh,
less than a year, technically.
that's amazing that you
When
can
they
get
come
all that
together,
done.
it's great.
Yeah.
It just took me several years to actually finally get the version I needed.
And what advice do you give young writers with different disabilities, similar to what you have, to being able to just sit down and focus and write a story?
I think the most important thing, especially if you're facing disabilities and challenges that are kind of tripping you up as a writer, is to learn who you are and what you need. Learn to fit writing into what your lifestyle is and what you need to be able to do. Because of my bipolar, I do NaNoWriMo every year. I know that I commit to the 30 days of November to get a 50,000 word draft, but I also know my bipolar cycle is 3 weeks. So I'm going to get 7 days heading upwards, a couple of days manic, 7 days heading downwards, and then a few days depression. And so I can expect to have a week where I'm basically non functional and I can't get any words done. And I've learned to kind of pace myself and understand myself enough to give myself permission to take that time, take that break, because if I take what I need, if I do my recuperation time, I recover faster, I get back on track, and I get back to the words more quickly. And I think as writers of any ability, knowing yourself and what you need is the most important thing. Not everyone can do a 9 to 5. In fact, I doubt any writer actually spends 8 hours a day writing a book, because the creative process is very taxing, it's very challenging. But you don't have to be the early bird that wakes up and just sits down at the computer and starts writing if that's not what works for you, if that's not how your body and your mind can function. So it's really good to kind of embrace who you are and write into that.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing so much about yourself and how you write these lovely stories for young people. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad you enjoyed the book.
Oh, my pleasure. Until next time, keep asking questions. And if you need a great series for young people, Spirit Talker is one of the best this year. We'll see you soon.